let's just do like around the table refresher, because then that's nice. And we can see, and then if you just maybe just say your name and then what you do here, and then that will help me understand kind of who I'm talking to and where to take this. For those who don't know me, I'm a neurologist in Toronto, and I've been working with Karen Lisa and here as well with our concussion patients. And the goal kind of these talks so far has been to, the first one, who is it? The first one? I guess we missed it. Right? You guys have remember it? Yeah. So the first talk, it's hopefully going to be kind of a series of just looking at pieces of concussion and how to manage concussion. And the first talk, what we did was we looked at kind of some of the underpinning psychology around concussion, which was really important. Just as a refresher, we talked about how a lot of patients tend to identify with their disease states, and especially in concussion, we see that a lot, where patients really get wrapped up into the concept that, quote unquote, they are the concussion. And so they become stagnant, and they don't do much of anything. And the key here is, and I alluded to it but didn't talk to it in great detail, was one of the emerging things that's being seen in the evidence, and I'm seeing, and I think Karen and Lisa are seeing in our patients here, is that if you really get them to start doing activity, and activity is a broad definition which we can talk about, but once they start doing actual stuff, they start to get better. And that's what this is kind of going to build on today. We're going to talk about how do you get them to actually start doing, and when I say stuff, I mean kind of physical activity, cognitive activity, work, functional means that they have to in life, working on their relationships, working with their kids, working at work, and how do you get them doing all that stuff? So that's a concept of what active rehabilitation is, and that's what we're going to talk about today. Kind of how do you practically get them to do that? Because I just introduced the concept last time and left it as kind of a little bit of a black box and said, here's your answer to this solution, but I didn't give any means how to practically apply this solution. So that's what I'm going to do today. That's me. So let's just...
I'm Melissa. I'm a kinesiologist here. Previously in 10, but now more focused on cardiovascular rehab.
Ashlyn, I'm one of the nurses here. I mainly work in hypertension and lung health, but I'll be working with you today, helping you with your patients. So.
And you know me, Stephanie, OTN.
I'm Kathy. I'm a community resource worker here, and I'm also a volunteer ski patrol, so I've dealt with concussions for years, and so it's sort of a personal interest topic.
You know me. The adult OT, cognitive screening assessments, and concussion management.
I'm Len. I'm on the adult mental health team working on the ISP project for CBT.
And I'm Laura. I'm a mental health counselor for the adult.
I'm Erica. So I've started working with Karen and Lisa with a lot of the concussion patients. I'm a child and youth mental health counselor, but I'm seeing a lot of the adult concussion patients and loving it. Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. So let's just dive right in. So this is the website for my clinic. Only showing this because this is where we can you can find the active rehabilitation presentation. So scrolling up here, just actually revamped it a little bit, make it easier. So under patient resources, we've got a lot of resources, and we're working on updating our resources as well. So under adult neurology and pediatric neurology, we have the concussion tiles. And essentially the active rehab more or less the same for both. So if you go to the adult neurology, you go to concussion, you've got a lot of stuff here. And then active rehabilitation for the general population, that's the one that we're going to go through today. Okay. And the key here, so what I want to do this is I really don't want to make this didactic at all. I don't want to teach us. This is going to be very practical. I'm going to pick on people. Okay? Thank you so much. Here. I'm going to pick on people. I'm going to involve you in the discussion. That's a much more positive way. That's going to go in line with what I really advocate with active rehab. So I just caught myself there, actually, using language I didn't want to use. Right? I think it's so important. It's so important to pay attention to our communication and how we're communicating things. You don't realize, like, this is actually a nice exercise. Take a couple weeks and just listen to yourself talk. Sounds really weird. Try to do it and listen and catch yourself in things that, like, you say it and you maybe say it reflexively and you don't really mean it, right? So something like, how often do we say, I'm sorry? And you don't actually mean it. Like, you don't really mean you're sorry. They're like, oh, what, you walk by someone who's sorry, right? You're not sorry that you walked by them and almost hit them, right? It happens, right? So, for instance, when I have patients, so I teach my staff this. So I tell them never to say sorry. Unless it's actually our error and we've done something wrong, don't reflexively say sorry. You just set up a dynamic with that language that already is typically inappropriate for what you're trying to accomplish. So here's an example. So the clinic's really busy, okay? Get really behind, right? Why am I getting behind? I'm not getting behind because I'm sitting on my phone and texting my buddies and getting ready to go out for the weekend or anything like that and decided to let the patient wait for 15 minutes. No, I got behind in clinic because someone walked through the door who was super complicated. And I had to spend like an extra 15 minutes talking to them. And the 15 minutes is like on a 401, you break for 5 seconds, right? And you create like an hour-long traffic jam back there, right? So that 15 minutes adds up, and like the clinic runs behind 40 minutes sometimes, and I don't feel good about it, but I'm not sorry. I don't say sorry to the patients, and I tell staff not to say sorry. So instead of saying sorry, my line is, thank you for waiting. And that's how I walk up and I say, thanks very much for waiting. Rather than write, I'm so sorry we're so late. Right? And already that just sets the dynamic up in a very different way that and we realize that language is so important. And why am I saying that? Because it's so important when you're dealing with these types of patients. You have to really watch our language, and our language should be very positive and reaffirming. And we're going to see some examples of that as we go through. So it's kind of just one thing I just caught myself doing. So I didn't like that I did that, so I don't want to pick on anybody. Right, I'm going to include you in the discussion. Right, see, it's different. It's right, picking you. Oh my God, pick on me. He's going to ask me questions. I'm so worried. I'm going to include you in the discussion. So I'm going to be part of this. That's nice. Right. Okay. So active rehab. So this is basically what we go through with our patients. Okay, and the concept, really, from the evidence point of view, is we used to tell people with concussion to just lie in a dark room and do nothing and let the brain heal on its own. Right? What happened to these patients is they all got worse. And there's a good study that kind of shows what we did with these patients in adolescence, and there were just higher rates of persistent symptoms or higher rates of the secondary kind of mental health issues that come with it, the depression and anxiety, that got worse. Versus people who they had not do this and kind of become more active, and those adolescents got better. So there was just a publication, and I can send it around to everybody, that just came out that looked at active rehabilitation in a randomized control trial in adolescents, and it was kind of the first one, and it showed significantly better results. So this is now kind of like a randomized trial. You got evidence that supports utilizing this. And then from like just like a basic, if you think about it, point of view, and many people here who've seen me on OTN maybe have heard me use this metaphor often. I talk about like hip surgery, right? And I say, if I went and did, like, comparing to a concussion, right? So if I went and did hip surgery on somebody, and I went in there and I repaired your hip and I put your hip replacement in, and then after the surgery, I said, stay in bed for 3 months and don't move. Just lie there, and your hip's going to heal and you're going to be great. Are you going to be great? No. There'll be some degree of spontaneous healing. So the hip will heal, right? The joint will re-heal, the bones will heal, the ligaments and the muscles and everything will heal. That will heal, right? But if you don't actively use the hip, then you're not going to create movement. They're going to heal in a single position. Maybe the rest of your muscles become deconditioned, right? Then you get secondary problems going on. Then you're just lying there all the time and you're thinking, this sucks. Like, I'm just lying there, my hip's supposed to get better, and I have to wait all this time. So that's the same concept with concussion. For whatever reason, we took an approach with the brain and thought that tissue that made up the brain was different than the tissue that makes up the hip. But no, it's not. So the brain just works differently. The brain doesn't work. You can't get in there and kind of move your brain around. But you can move your brain around by thinking. You can move your brain around by opening and closing your hand. Like, what's doing that? It's not the muscles are the end point. But where is all that happening? It's happening up in a bunch of neurons that are firing those signals in your brain and telling your hand to open and close. Right? So if you don't actively get your brain to do that kind of stuff, well, the pathway to open and close your hand, right, is going to get stagnant and not work. So it's the same with concussion. It's a whole brain injury, so we have the different realms that are injured. The emotional realm, we have the sleep problems, the cognitive problems, the physical problems. You have to get people doing stuff in all those realms, because that will activate the pathways that are supposedly damaged. That's kind of the concept. That's the whole concept of active rehab. So does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All right, so here's what we do. So I kind of talk to patients a little bit about this. So this is so first I take them through what is a concussion, which we've covered before. So this information presentation is mainly just for patients. Here's just a review of those symptoms. So it's there for patients as well. As I mentioned, the cognitive, emotional, physical, and sleep symptoms that we get. Okay, with headache being the big one, right, for the physical typically. Okay. So this is what I say. So here's where it comes, right? So here's the language piece. Right away I say to patients, right, you're in rehab. This is rehab now. That's what you are. You have to switch this. You're not recovering. No recovery. This is rehab, right? And what does it mean by rehab? Because it implies activity, doing stuff. In recovery, we think more of that person just lying in the bed while their hip gets better. Okay? So by using rehab, I tell them, look, there's these 3 principles here. Okay? Right? No one's ever had like a really exciting, awesome, healthy, great rehab. No, and no, rehab is hard. It's hard work. You're gonna have to work hard at this, right? And you have to have some sense of belief that you're going to do well, right? And the fact is, you are going to do well. So if you do the rehab, you are going, no matter what, that person is not going to get worse in rehab. That never happens. If they are authentically applying the rehab, they're going to get better. To what degree, I don't know. And I say, I don't know to what degree you're going to get better. I really can't predict that for you. But I can tell you you're going to get at least a little bit better. You're going to get somewhat better than where you are right now. Okay. All right, everyone with me so far? Any questions so far? Again, if you have questions, just shoot up your hand, ask. Part of the conversation. Okay, so this is the key, right? So with rehab, like, you're out of work. You're not in that sport you want to be. Okay? So why are you lying around and doing nothing? There are no rest days. All right? And if you're not working, there's no excuse for you not to be outside walking. And people say, oh, it's too cold. I say, get in your car and go to the mall and walk. Go to the community center and walk. Clear space in your house and walk back and forth. Right? There's no excuses for days off. Okay? And the key here is, as in any rehab process, it's a step-by-step, gradual process. Little steps, not big, huge steps. Okay? And then here's the big key. So this is where everybody gets really concerned. Everybody gets concerned about, well, when I start walking, I get symptoms. Right? Okay. That doesn't mean you're getting worse. Right? Now, granted, we're not talking about kind of the first hours of your concussion, right? We talked about this last time, the Berlin consensus meeting gave some guidelines to this and said within the first 24 to 48 hours, people should then start to become active. So you do need a rest period. That rest period is for 24 to 48 hours, just to ensure there's no other major injury going on, right? I.e., we want to make sure a person, after they got their head trauma, isn't bleeding in their brain or getting progressively worse. Right? And they're going to the emergency department. Now you're not talking concussion, you're talking something totally different. So there is kind of like that rest period. So I didn't tell you the exact truth. So after this is all assuming that that person has a diagnosed concussion and we're beyond the 48-hour mark. Okay? So yeah, so you're going to walk and you might get a worse headache. You might get a little bit of dizziness, and it doesn't mean you're making things worse at all. So that's a big misconception, right? So you have to work through some of these symptoms, and you're going to continue through the steps even though people experience symptoms. Okay? To how we do that, though, that's what we're going to talk about. Okay? And then there's this concept of daily challenges that I developed, and that's what we do to build up kind of the cognitive and the physical activity levels over time. Okay, so what are the steps for active rehab? So here are the steps. So essentially what we did was we incorporated some of the guidelines that already exist. We kind of mishmashed them together into a way that we could present something that patients could take home and kind of do on their own with the guidance of OTs and PTs and nurses and other people that they're going to enroll in their care. Right? Those are the general steps. And what we do, so this framework allows patients to have a stepwise idea of where they need to go. All right. So how do you move from one step to the next? Well, moving on one step to the next depends on how you feel, so it's not what you feel. That's a really big key concept. These patients are like, I have a headache, I can't do anything. No, it's how does that headache feel for you in order for you to be able to continue to do activity. And how are you feeling we measure it. So this is a scale that I developed as well, this green, yellow, and red scale. And I think I talked about it last time. Does I remember it? Or people here have heard me talk about it ad nauseum. Who knows me? Okay. But this is like the key. I can't remember how much I talked about this last time. Did we go into...
I think you reviewed it, but
Reviewed it?
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll kind of just do a quick timer on it, because this is really key. There's like 2 major slides on this whole presentation that I really spend a lot of time with patients. Okay. So this is roughly why I designed this was because I was very frustrated all through my training, all through residency with this. I'm going to say silly. Some people might say it's not silly, and it's not. You got to have some kind of validated scale. And right now we have like these pain scales that are validated. That patients give a number, or they circle a happy face and everything. Right? Great. That's so unhelpful, in my opinion. It just doesn't tell me anything. Okay? Because I mean, just who has some kind of chronic lingering pain, like back pain or an old injury? Anybody here in the room? What do you have? Neck. Okay, good. So I am going to include you in the conversation right now. Okay. So neck pain. I have back pain. I had back surgery when I was younger, and and I actually just re-injured it like in December, and now better. So we all have this kind of stuff that's going on all the time. Or who had like a bad sleep last night and doesn't feel totally rested today, right? Yeah, we might. Some doesn't. Okay. Right. So we all have these things that are always there. Life isn't perfect. Life is like, right? Like life is hard. It's difficult. There's always suffering. Yeah.
And this is what I want to bring up. Like I was writing down the personality factors, because there are some people who truly have that core belief. Yeah, life's hard. You don't get the best sleep. You show up anyways.
Right.
And they're receptive to like this belief that like it's not going to be permanent. That today I have a headache, but tomorrow I might not. And that they have like a discipline to kind of push through or persevere through discomfort and tolerate discomfort. So do you see that? Like, do you see that some people get so much better or like recover because of their personalities, because of just like the way that they are and the way they see the world, versus other people who are so victim oriented, who are so like excuse oriented, who are like, is that really
I think that's so that's great. I think this scale allows me to take those personalities and find a common kind of measure between them.
Yeah.
Right? It allows me to take somebody who's that like real big person who's going to push through no matter what, is going to be green, 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 green.
Right.
Right? Versus the person who on the opposite side is no matter what going to be red, 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 red.
Yeah, like me or.
So it comes back to the cognitive dissonance, which we talked about the other time, right? Is like really showing these people that, are you really red?
Yeah.
Right? Right? And the green, green, green people are kind of like the hawks. We call it, there's actually a good study, I think I may mention last time, the hawks and the doves in concussion, right? Yeah. Some people like just go crazy and do too much, and some people do nothing, right? And those the ones doing too much are the hawks, and they don't do well because they're overdoing it, and they actually do have like a real injury, right? Or they have like real brain injury, and they push themselves so much that they impede their own recovery by exhausting their energy stores. And then the doves also have the real brain injury. They don't do enough, so they don't try to use the little bits of energy they have to get better. So personality probably plays a massive role. It would be so fascinating to see that, though.
Like, do you say, well, you're a bit of a dove? Like, do you bring that up with you? Yeah.
I might think that was a compliment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So kind of like bring that, like, don't ignore that reality for people.
I never do. Yeah.
This is like part of this is a contributing factor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I 100% will do it. It depends, and then I kind of gauge who the person is, and I either tell them like right away, or I kind of ease into it by the second appointment or so, because sometimes it's hard for people to hear.
Yeah,
it's hard, right? Yeah. And there is a series of questions I know now that I can follow that will, those types of people, the doves, the ones that are more identified with the victimization and where they are in this state and what's happened to them. There's a series of questions I know that will always make those people cry, no matter what. No, I'm like 99.9% of the time I can predict. But if I say this one question, second question, third, they're going to cry. I know that they do that to themselves, right? And they don't like to face that. Yeah. And the moment someone else like recognizes that in them, right? They just they know it. They already know it. So that's like, this is what happens with this scale. It often makes people cry, right? And because what it's doing is it's not allowing you to make excuses, because when I give you a 1 to 10, you get a 10. But I'm sitting here and my nails are painted, right? And I look really nice. I put makeup on that morning, right? Or like the guy, like he's looking good. He went to the gym that day a little bit, right? And did his hair, looks great, and right, and is all dressed nice, but he's got 10 out of 10 pain. Right? So I call those incongruencies, right? Like, have you ever been 10 out of 10 pain? Like, who's really been 10 out of 10 pain in their life? You're not doing that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you're especially not getting in a car, driving, and waiting for a doctor's appointment so nicely and sitting there looking fine and not in any discomfort, right? So I don't discredit that they have pain. So I tell people, look, there's like nothing on here that talks about pain.
Right.
Nothing here mentions your pain, right? I'm not asking you how bad your pain is. I'm asking you how functional you are despite your pain. So again, this column, here's your symptoms. So it can be anything, right? Anything in life it can be, really, but I often use headache as an example, right? So we can use like neck pain. Okay, we're gonna go with you, okay? All right, so you have neck pain, right? So do you have neck pain? Yes. So if you have it, yes, you're green, yellow, or red. All right. Are you still able to do what you want to do right now?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you want to be doing right now?
Listening to you.
Yeah.
Paying
Sitting here,
attention.
listening and paying attention. So you're still able to do that.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Are you doing it 100% or not
Yes.
at 100%?
Yeah, I'm
You are.
at 100%.
Yeah. So you are
Green.
green. So you have green neck pain. So
Neck pain.
despite the neck pain, okay, but what's your neck pain at 10?
Well, it's not here right now. But
Oh, it's not here now.
yesterday
Okay,
would have
okay.
been a good day because it was really bad yesterday. But I still was
Okay.
like, it probably was like, I don't know. If I was had to rate it, it probably was like a 6 out of
Okay.
10.
Okay. That was
But I
yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
Okay. All right. Seven, you're tired. Seven, you're tired. Okay,
Yeah.
feeling tired. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're tired, right? Are you able to do what you want to do?
Yep.
Okay. Are you doing it at 100%?
I'd like to hope so, but yeah. Maybe not.
Okay, so I don't let this. Okay, it's not. So you can't maybe not be doing something at 100%.
Yeah.
So are you? What do you need to be doing right now?
Paying attention, listening. So I'm doing it.
You're doing it. Okay. Are you doing that at 100%?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. You're not falling asleep.
Nope.
You're not sitting here like this,
Nope.
right? Like, we do that sometimes, and then you know that you're kind of like in a yellow zone, right? Okay, but you're not, all right? But on a sleep scale of like not tired being 1 and being the most tired like you've ever been in your life, 10, where's your sleep?
Like a 5.
So she's at 5. So she's at 5 out of 10. But she's green,
Right.
Yeah.
okay? So it's totally different. So if I had just asked Stephanie, oh, how's your sleep today? What's your sleep today? I'm a 5. So you have moderately poor wakefulness right now, right? Then that gives me a whole different perception of what Stephanie can and cannot do if I just use this number scale. So it never helped me. It never helped. And then I kind of developed this and allowed me, and I say to patients, look, and it takes re-educating them every time. Every time it does. Because, number one, it's a bit of an odd concept, right? Because we don't like to think that way, but it also is packed with denial. Stephanie was sitting here in this group, this living group, she's not even a patient or anything. You didn't even want to answer that right at the beginning a little bit, right? Like, why? Why didn't you want to answer at the beginning? Because we have this like little resistance, and we all have this internal resistance. It's the reason you don't go to like your workout that day. It's the reason like you picked that food and you really shouldn't have picked it, right? There's like always this little bit of resistance that's inside. Oh, it's natural, right? It's a protective mechanism for us. It keeps us away from like dangerous heart stuff. Right? And that becomes totally blown out of proportion when you are sick in a chronic disease state. This doesn't need to apply to concussion. This applies to kind of anything, right? So it's a really important scale. And then once I hammer this home with patients and they get it, it does two things. One, I have the medications on here because for me, I developed in the context of headache first. So it allowed me to patients to self-regulate when they should be using their headache medication, okay? Because medication overuse is a big problem in concussion. People use too much Tylenol, too much Advil, too much Cambia, too much naproxen, and they can only use it 3 days out of the week. So I had to tell patients, this is how you break out of that, and you got to be honest with yourself. How bad is your headache? Does your headache not allow you to do the things you want to do completely? That's when you take your medication. But then I started to use it for just kind of all symptoms, and I've used it in other disease states as well. Right? So this allows, and then I developed it into the active rehab program. So now I use it as a way to help people self-regulate how they should be moving through their stages of active rehabilitation. Okay? So the last thing I'll say about this is the one caveat I tell patients, after I re-educate them kind of every time, and every time what I'll do is they'll come and they'll be like, oh, well, my headache didn't get any better. My headache hasn't improved in the last 3 months. I'll be like, okay, and everybody's heard me do it. I just did it to you guys. I'll be like, so what's your headache right now? My headache's yellow. Or they'll say red. Some of them say red. And I say, okay, let's go back, pull it up, right? You have a headache? Yes. What are you able to do right now, right? Or what do you need to be doing right now? Are you able to do what you need to be doing right now? No. Well, what do you need to be doing right now? And they'll be like, well, I need to go do the shopping, and I need to pick up my kids. I'm like, no. What do you need to be doing right now? I need to be able to eat better, and no, right? And it takes like I use the Socratic method with them because I want them to come onto the idea on their own. So I'll keep on asking them. It takes some people forever to answer that question. It's denial. They don't want to say, like, I just need to be sitting here listening to you and having a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. And I said this before. The only people who get this right off the bat are children. Under 10. They're just like more concrete. They don't get all abstract.
Future.
Yeah. And that whole, they're not.
Like, I just want to be a healthier person in general. Okay.
Yeah.
Getting into the present.
So exactly, that's so important. What you just said, their kids are much more present. Mm-hmm. That's why childhood's so nice.
Yeah.
Childhood's amazing. You don't have, and we know this. You have no ability to judge the future. Mm-hmm. You actually don't have future thinking ability. Future thinking ability is the only reason I'm going to get a little bit psychological. It's the only reason humans are any different than any animal on the planet. Mm-hmm. It's not anything else. It's our ability to understand that there's a future. Mm-hmm. The concept of time is what allows us now to deny gratification in the present in order to obtain some kind of reward in the future. There's a great study. There's chimps. So chimps are like beautifully intelligent. One of the closest primates, the closest animal in the world to us. 97% in genome is similar or something like that, right? There's an experiment where they have a jar, there's a cookie in the jar, the chimps stick their hand in the jar with the cookie in there, right? So they can get their hand in by squeezing their hand like this, okay? But if they open their hand, you can't get your hand out. And there's a cookie in there or whatever treat. So again, they grab the cookie, right? They will not open their hand to get their hand out. Because they won't realize, like they want that cookie now, they have to eat it now, they have to eat that food now. They have no concept of the future that if they just let their hand go, they might be able to get a cookie somewhere else. They need to eat that food right there, right? So I get a little sidetracked, but the concept of time is really important. In concussion, this happens. People get lost in the future. Mm-hmm. They get lost in their anxiety of the future. Mm-hmm. So they're constantly future thinking. I want to be this, I should be this. And their bar that they're comparing to is the past.
Do you think they misjudge it? Like, I never ever had a headache as bad before in the past. When realistically, they probably did have some degree of like pain or discomfort.
Yeah.
But they think like it was so much better before.
Yeah.
So they have this like false.
Why do you think they do that?
I'm trying to think of like why that would happen.
Would it be like you had a concussion and now report me like
Yeah,
oh look how bad I am now.
Yeah.
I just want to be like what I was before.
Like kind of like justification of like how
Absolutely.
bad. Like kind
Remember
of
what happens when they get cognitive dissonance.
Right.
They're broken, right? They can
So they
either
have
decide to get better
confirm
or they can decide to stay that victim, that
Right.
broken, disabled individual,
Yeah.
in order to reinforce their their reality that they are the disabled person.
Mm-hmm.
They must justify. How you justify it, right?
Yeah.
I never was this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm this new disabled individual,
Right.
but
So
I never
it
was
helps them
this.
to confirm this like consistent identity of like always being sick or ill or disabled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just made up narrative in their mind to reinforce their current state, right? Yeah.
And they label it as like a concussion when it could be an unrelated
Hmm?
headache. Like it could be an unrelated like bad day. It has nothing to do with the concussion, but they attribute constantly to the concussion. It's all the concussion.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. So the attribution
And
error
that's the secondary factors that build up in concussion. That's all the secondary stuff that just piles on and then gets lost. And that's why these patients 2 years later come in and they're just like a nebulous of like symptoms, right? So, and again, I'm not at all saying that none of this is real. It's all real for them, and some is attributed to the brain injury, but it's so clouded you can't figure out what's what anymore. So there's no point to be like, let's like give you all these meds and treat this headache and give you all these meds and treat this. No, you just got you can't tease it apart anymore. It's all built up on each other. So this is why I think the active rehab works. Is that you can't fix it no matter what. Even if we did be able to pick out, okay, all this column, this is your brain injury stuff, and this is all your secondary factor stuff. What are you going to do about that? Nothing different.
Mm-hmm.
Just get them living life again, right? So that's kind of what the active rehab does, to some degree. I don't like to say that there's like cure-alls in medicine, but there's maybe a cure-all for concussion with this. I don't know. At least it's supportive of it, right? Okay. So like I said, we can talk a lot about this because again, it's like, this functional scale is very practical, but it's also a bit philosophical and it delves into psychological elements of concussion and everything else. So I use that though, we use that as the guide. So then I say to patients, okay, so like, what do you need? All right, super simple, all right? You need calendar. So calendar sort. And I like people, I've moved away, like I used to get them to buy these apps or like download these apps. No, just get like a plain, like old school analog calendar by the dollar store, one that shows you the whole month, right? They need a support person. So these people don't do well when they have no support. So unfortunately, some don't. Okay, but they need like a spouse or or a partner or a friend or someone to help them. So they need that. So I'm telling you, you got to go recruit somebody to kind of help you in this, right? And you got to be determined. This is the hard work. You got to do it. If you don't not determined, it's not going to happen. So how exactly does it work? So here's coming up is important slide number 2. This introduction to it. So this is the daily challenge method that I kind of created and incorporated the green, yellow, red scale. So you got to break up your physical. So these people typically deal with physical problems and cognitive challenges. So there's independent exercise and team-based exercises, and then there's these 5 cognitive areas that I built up. And I said, okay, these are going to be your challenges, and every day you're going to complete physical and cognitive ones. And here's the second most important slide. Okay. So this is the daily challenge method, right? Okay. So what do they have to do? So every single day they get their calendar, right? Tell them, and you're gonna have a daily challenge. You're gonna have physical and cognitive. What exactly these are? I have a prescribed framework that I'm going to show you in the next few slides. But just to speak broadly, they're going to have a physical and cognitive challenge. Okay. And then they're open their calendar and they're going to say, okay, so for tomorrow, I'm going to write down what my physical challenges and my cognitive challenges are. I'm going to write them down for tomorrow. And I'm going to schedule them into my schedule for tomorrow. So starting to make a schedule is a really important thing for these people. They need to have a schedule. They need to have structure. They are just all over the place and overwhelmed. So this is why the calendar helps. Okay, so they need to have a schedule. So the schedule is going, and we have kind of a variation of this on the website. It's one of under the patient resources, the schedule that they can fill in. So the next day, they're going to write for the next day their physical challenge and their cognitive challenge scheduled in a certain time. Okay, I'm going to give an example. Okay, so we're going to say that their physical challenge is to walk for 10 minutes tomorrow. So they say 4 p.m. it's scheduled to walk 10 minutes. They're going to go on a 10-minute walk. Doesn't matter, rain, sunshine, whatever. They've got to commit to that 10-minute walk. All right, so they're committed to it and they pick the time. How do they come up with that time? They either, at that point, they have some kind of baseline, right, that they're able to walk for 10 minutes, so they pick their 10-minute walk, right? If they have no idea whatsoever, they might need like a day or two to figure out what it is, or I just say, okay, so you start at 2 minutes. If you don't know, then 2 minutes is your start time, right? So they pick some time scheduled in the next day. All right. Then the next day comes, 4 o'clock rolls around, they go on their challenge. They're going to complete it or they're going to incomplete it. All right, so what does it mean to complete a challenge? That means to be able to do that challenge by experiencing 1 red symptom or less during that allotted time. Okay, so an incomplete would be if they experience 2 red symptoms at any time during their challenge. That's an incomplete. Okay, so here's an example. So they say they pick their 10-minute walk. So they get up and they start walking, okay? At 7 minutes, they start to develop like a green headache. It quickly goes to yellow, right? Meaning that they're slowed down a little bit from their walk, but they're still able to go because it's yellow. They're just not doing it at 100%, but they're still able to walk. Then their headache gets so bad that they have to go down and sit down. They can't walk anymore. They can't take a single another step, all right? They've got to sit down. So they sit down and they rest. That's 1 red. So now they've hit red because they had to stop walking. That's red symptom. Okay? So they sit down and they rest. And They sit there and they breathe and they take some time and if within a reasonable amount of time, they can move that red back up to yellow. So the headache kind of calms down a bit and they can take a few more steps now. So they get back up and they start walking again. Okay, so that was at like minute 7. Let's say they feel okay, it's like yellow, but they're still going minute 9. It hits them so hard again, they have to sit down. Now they're done. Okay, they've had red symptom twice during their 10-minute walk. They did not achieve 10 minutes. That's an incomplete. They go home. And they're done for the day. They do not attempt another walk again. That's it. They incompleted their challenge. Okay, so what do? They do it again the next day. They fail that day, they do it again the next, and they do it again the next, and they do it again the next, and they go and they go and they go until they can walk for 10 minutes. Until they can get 10-minute walk without any without 2 red symptoms.
So just 1 red, okay.
So let's say the next day they go out for that walk, and at 9 minutes this time they hit red. They take their rest, they get up, they breathe, they're fine, and then they finish and they get their other minute. Good, they're done. If they get their 10 minutes, they go home, that's it. They don't do another second more. Okay? And once they go home, now what they've done is they've completed it. Even though they got to red at one point, they completed it. So what do? They get their calendar, they put a little nice check mark there, and they write their next walk for the next day. What do they have to do the next day? They must increase the duration, and they must increase the intensity. They're not allowed ever to do a 10-minute walk ever again. It's got to be more. Right? And how much more? I tell them, well, listen, if it was really a struggle, right, and you hardly made it, then you just increase by a little bit. So 10 minutes and 30 seconds the next day. 10 minutes and 5 seconds the next day. I don't care. As long as you increase. Because then I'd like to do a little math with patients sometimes. I'm like, okay, let's just say you did 1 minute. I'm not going to see you for 2 months. At 60 days, you did 1 minute extra every single day. Just 1 minute every single day. That's all you have to do. What are you walking by next time I see you? 70-minute walk in 2 months. Right? And so that sometimes is like staggering to people. Like, oh yeah, well, I can walk another minute every day. Right? That's all I have to do? Wow, and I'll be walking for an hour? So that's the concept. Like with active rehab, you can really progress quite quickly with some of these patients in such little examples, but they have to be present and they have to be willing to do it at the time. Now, obviously walking an hour, so then it comes to a point that it's walking an hour doesn't really make a lot of sense, right? I'd rather they not spend a whole hour walking. So what they have to do is and this is where OT is very important in getting other people, because I can't see people every day, or I can see people once a week. So I try to say, like, look, once you get to a reasonable walking period, like half hour, now you're going to start to increase your intensity instead. So then maybe you dial your walk back down to 15 minutes, but for 30 seconds of those 15 minutes, you're doing a little jog. Because people are trying to get better. And then the steps after I'm going to show you but then you'd be progressing through the overall framework, which I'm going to show you. But that's the concept of the active rehab. The TKE concept is you're never, ever, 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 ever allowed to scale backwards.
I think sometimes we have the problem, like I'll have people that will get through the challenge, but then they're kaput, not during it, but afterwards the next day they're like, oh my God, I couldn't move the next day. So then the next day they're not able to pick it up. Mm-hmm. So then we look, like, I don't know, I go back and I look at what is their threshold, and maybe we overshot it, and maybe we need to kind of start smaller and then build. Because a lot of what Lisa and I do, it's more like it's the pacing and planning so that people can actually manage their day. So this concept is awesome when people are stuck in rest, and we all have those people who have been, sitting doing nothing, not going back to work, not going back to school for like months, years. Mm-hmm. And then we also have the other people that are at work, at school, but they feel horrible, like they're functioning, yellow for their whole life. And I guess my question is sort of how do we apply this concept to those people? So they are doing stuff all day long, but they're not feeling well. So with those people, I don't always use this concept. Like I talk to them more about lifestyle and pacing and planning, but I'd love to hear your input on that. Like if the goal setting is the essential part of this for the brain to adapt.
So it's like a bit of a pendulum, right? How do you establish that baseline at the beginning, right? So maybe somebody thinks, oh yeah, I can do 20 minutes, right? But then you have to get like, well, have you ever done 20 minutes before?
Yeah.
Okay, so then maybe scale down and start lower. Yeah. So maybe what the first thing is like, Like start lower, so start less. So that way we tend not to overshoot. So I'll often say to the patient, they'll say, "Oh yeah, I can walk 15 minutes." I'm like, you can't sit in front of a computer for 5 minutes. Why do you think you can walk for 15 minutes? No, start at 5 minutes. Right? And who cares? And they start at 5 minutes, and at least if they're doing that, then they can make bigger increases going forward. Because I'd rather people have a bunch of small victories than big failures. Because if I say to them, and I think this is what you mean, Karen, if I say to somebody, "Oh, go do your 15 minutes," they go home and they do this for 15 minutes, and then they're in bed for 2 days after. They're going to be like, "This doctor doesn't know what he's talking about." Right? So I think one thing is that. The other is the energy conservation, and that's why it's important. And I think that's why our teamwork is important, because I don't know how patients are going to go and take this and then go apply it. So that's why they need the coaches on the side to help them moderate this stuff. So what do you do with the yellow people? The yellow people, it depends where you get them. If we've worked them up from rest, you're on top of that. So you shouldn't get into that scenario with those patients because you've been moderating their activity. If this is a person who's like a constant yellow all day, we see them by the time they're like 2 years out of their concussion, but at work all day, 3 kids at home, going to the gym 3 times a week, and all this stuff. Well, we missed their whole first 2 years. How do they get there? You got to reset these people. Let's start from square one.
So is that what you do? Like you would start them back at the beginning and gradually build them up? Okay.
They're coming in and playing, and they can't do anything for 2 days afterwards. Reset.
Okay.
Reset, start from square one.
Yeah.
And then, because some of that, how much of that is I'm not mean to be mean, but how much of that is actually real? How much of it how much is it not more than what we were talking about, right? How much of it is all that layered stuff, that psychology and identity mixed in, because we don't know what's been going on for those first 2 years or 6 months when we weren't involved in there. So I would just reset them and restart the clock on them. Start low and go slow with them.
Go up. Okay.
Take away their gym time, right? Get out of the gym. Go do something like scale everything down. Exactly.
So that you feel well, get through the day, and then we build from there.
And start recognizing that they can do this stuff. And they are not the disabled person who goes off and goes to the gym for 10 minutes or half an hour and then has a monstrous headache for 2 days thereafter.
And do you have to kind of prioritize with those people? Because if we have patients who have 3 kids, and so they can't just not be on, they can't just not parent, or they can't just not work. So you have to kind of figure out what is most important and take away all the other stuff.
Think about your own life.
Right.
How much stuff you have going on in your life where you could do so much better if you focused and cut away stuff that you don't need to be doing, right? Or that's not helping you. Right? You got to cut those away so you can focus on things that are going to help you. So with these if you can't not take care of the kids, really can, right? So that's got to I go up on the priority scale, right? And if they're doing all this is why I actually don't like patients who have massage therapy. I like the patients. I don't like their style of management when they have massage therapy and physiotherapy and OT and speech and vision and vestibular.
What?
Who's
Well,
done
that's their life.
That's
It's a
their
full-time
life.
job.
And that's
So
managing on the illness.
and that's the
That is. So
Yeah.
that's actually where I find using a day planner. I'm now encouraging all of them to go out and buy a day planner because the calendar's great, but when I make them for a week or two, briefly jot down exactly what they're doing, then they can see, oh my goodness, wow, I've got this, and this, and talking about what's the priority, what's important for you, how can you take care of yourself, how can you do all of these tasks and incorporate rest, and that's how we kind of, I use that as a session to go in and show them, this is how things can be done differently to try to manage your symptoms.
That's great. Yeah. So day planner would be great because it can get complicated when you get busy. So
and then it kind of clicks for them
when they see it.
And they've got these therapies going on every day. Wow, where's the time for you?
This is the difference between working with OT, where you see these patients all the time, and I just have that one day, so I got to do my calendar. Here we go. This works, right? Okay. So that's a big difference right there. And I think a day planner would probably be great, and I'm sure it's working well for patients, but this is where the interaction, the practicality of applying this stuff comes into play. Yeah. So there you go. So that's the challenge. How do you pass each step? Okay, so here are detailed. So this is a bit more of a detailed framework. I've got every step up there. Okay, and kind of like things that you can do. Here's some examples of physical activity. Here's the examples of cognitive activity. And here's just an example of what I want people to achieve in order to pass out of step 2. Right? So how did I develop these? Some of them, again, they're based on some of the guidelines that already exist. Others I kind of looked at and said, well, what's a realistic amount of time you have to be doing certain tasks in order to get to the next stage. So for instance, this one has physical activity. Of the physical activity listed here, I want people doing 2 20-minute periods of continuous activity. So 20 minutes at one point of the day and 20 minutes at the other point of the day. Right? So that's just walking or whatever. Cognitive activity, I have these 5 categories here. They've got to do 15 minutes each of those things for a total of 75 minutes. So roughly, if you can do that kind of stuff, you can probably graduate to some degree of applying this thing. So it's like getting back to the fundamentals and having a reasonable amount of time working on fundamentals. Right? So that's very light activity. Now, as long as they can do these two, all of this stuff in one day, and within each one, doing them without achieving 2 red symptoms, they then pass. And that's their pass. And that's kind of listed right there. Right? Yeah.
So just going back to what Karen said, because I just had someone this week that's back to work full time and whatever. The work that she does is more of a physical job versus cognitive requirements. But she can't even read for 5 minutes. So technically, she's back to. She's gone back to skiing and she's started horseback riding again, and I was like, whoa. So we talked about all of that, but in terms of work, how do you, because technically she's not at step 2. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what are you sort of
So 2 things there. So number 1, the first and foremost is that's very incongruent. It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? So I think that person would need to be kind of reevaluated. Why can't this person read for 5 minutes? So first off and foremost, and I kind of didn't preface this with this, but I should, but obviously we want to make sure that there is no actual true pathology going on that's kind of preventing them. That this is just plain concussion-related symptoms, right? So what's going on there, right? Is there a clear vestibular problem going on? That is there some other kind of factor that may be impeding this? So maybe they need to be reassessed from that point of view, from the ophthalmologist or optometrist or the neurologist or somebody, right? So that would be step 1, right? If you have such an incongruency, right? Step 2, then, what you can kind of think of well, why is this so incongruent? Why is this person not able to read if we've ruled out actual pathologic, other potential problems that might be confounding the picture? Why can't this person read? Then I beg to say that there's probably some piece lost in the psychology of this and the identification, because it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that somebody could go out there and work a physically demanding, hard job all day long relatively well and not be able to read for 5 minutes, right? So I'd argue that there's other stuff to it. So what do we have to do? All right. So this is a bit of a unique scenario. What I would probably do in that case is they got to work because probably they're stressed from work, they need money and whatever. So if they're doing that and we made sure that they're healthy and safe doing it, then they could probably continue to work, and you continue to work with accommodations or whatever. You got to really hammer down and get them working on active rehab. So then you're kind of in a step 2 for this, and so maybe there is a dichotomy of how you go through this, right? That would be more like a case-by-case scenario, how you'd work with that, right? But that person needs intense active rehab in terms of reading, right? They need to just
probably
start doing it.
Challenging with the scale, because can they actually not read for 5 minutes, or is it where are they at? In terms of
our next appointment is a vision screening.
Right. So that's good.
So that's probably good to see. And then you could even get her to do some reading.
I just mean, is it green? Yeah, after you've done that.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Really, that's not a bad idea. Have them read in front of you for 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, I usually get people to do that.
Yeah.
We just didn't during our first, but we do find there's people back to work, yet they're reporting crazy. They're still what they're reporting and fits into step 2. So do you? I mean, we do claw them back, but I guess it's clawing back in certain
Certain
areas, and then
Yeah.
allowing
you
them
could
the
be on different
successes.
stages physically and cognitively.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You
That's
could be, and
important
if
to
you
know.
are that way and you've ruled out a true
Underlying
pathologic
pathology,
underlying pathology for it,
Yeah.
right? Then this is an identification issue.
Yeah.
This is somebody
Yeah.
who is right, and probably you just said their first appointment.
yeah.
So this is the first appointment. So you don't know much about this person yet, right? And they don't know much about you, and they don't know much about the process, right? So the truth is, like, how much have they really tried to read for 5 minutes
Yeah.
beyond knowing anything about kind of a green, yellow, red functional scale and how to balance themselves, right? It might just be that they decided early on in their symptoms, when they had true kind of cognitive fatigue from vision, they may have decided at that point in time, I can't do it. And then just persisted
Well, I
in
think
it.
there's
right?
an element of that for sure. When people are struggling with certain tasks, they avoid them, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely, right? We all do that too.
Yeah.
I always take it back to myself. This is the best, like, this is what I always look at, like, how am I like these patients? I'm exactly like these patients. In so many ways, exactly like that. It just becomes so obvious with these patients because of they have a condition, they had a brain injury. So just all of that inside of us that already exists just becomes magnified, right? To some degree, some of us have been there in these states where we're really sick, and we identify with our illness. Right? Maybe you know that about yourself, maybe you don't. Just think about it the times when you're sick. I mean, do you do this kind of stuff? I'm going to tell you right now, I do. I know I do. Right? But then now I'm kind of more aware of it, so I try to catch myself and pull myself out of it. But I mean, even with my back, as I mentioned before, I hurt my back in December. I was stuck in this for like 3 or 4 weeks, right? To my own relative degree. Right? But I was, and it took me kind of like some personal kind of self-reflection to pull myself out of it. And the moment I pulled myself out of it, like 2 or 3 days later, my back started getting better. It was crazy. I just decided, I was like, I gotta go back to square one. I'm like, I have to accept that, like, my back is not good right now. I've exacerbated my injury. I'm not gonna reach that milestone I want to reach. Square one, went right back. And the moment I decided I gotta go back to square one with my exercise and the way I am at work and everything, the moment I decided, within 2 days, my back started to get better. It was crazy.
Powerful.
Yeah, and I've never been so present to that before in my life, because I haven't hurt my back again like that for a couple of years, and in that couple of years I've started to do a lot of work with patients like this. Yeah, it's so powerful. Okay, so, and then here, so this is just progressing on, so step 3, right? So what happens is the exercises get a bit tougher, the cognitive tasks get a bit tougher. There's an reintroduction to work at this step, because again, if you can do 75 minutes of cognitive work, you can go back to work for like a little bit amount of time, with some accommodations. So there's some reintroduction to work, and then there's some components here. Just as an example, you got to do 1 30-minute period of continuous physical activity at this stage. If you can do that, then you're ready to start doing team practices. Because if you do 30 minutes of activity that's kind of sport related, right, you can now join a practice that's no contact, because you can at least do a practice for 30 minutes on the team. Right? So again, this is all kind of highlighted through here, so you can go through this and read this, and it's just a stepwise gradual reintroduction. But the key is, within each step, people are doing the daily challenge method to build up to their like final test. It's like, think there's like an exam in each step. And the daily challenge is your practice. Okay, now I've reached my 30 minutes of doing running drills, so yeah, I can do it, and I'm going to try it one day. I did it that day, great, now I'm on to step 4. So it's a way to self-regulate for patients. In terms of the green, yellow, red, one thing to note, once they get to step 4, they have to be able to do this now with no red symptoms, right? So you're allowed red symptoms for 2 and 3, because this is still, you're not actually applying what you're doing. You're not going out. You're going out to work a little bit in school a little bit, but you're not going back to a team practice. Like, I don't want anybody playing hockey who's getting red symptoms within 30 minutes. That's not good, because then we have to worry about re-injury, significant re-injury. Okay, and then step 5 again is just to build up even more. Step 6, you're ready to go. All right. This is just a slide for patients who just gives them kind of various symptoms, how to manage them. And the last slide here is just your take-home tips. So this is what I go through the patient at the very end, and just kind of summarizes all the points I said. So, number 1, experiencing symptoms doesn't mean you're getting worse. As long as you're doing red, green, yellow, red, yellow, green, yellow, red, then You know, you can self-regulate. If they're constantly getting red, they're pushing themselves beyond the threshold. They're not going to get worse, because if you're getting red, you're ideally not exposing yourself to another head injury. You're not in hockey practice or football practice or anything by that time, because you're not allowed. The only downside of going red all the time is that you're overstepping your threshold. You got to learn to scale it back and not get to that red. Because the worst thing that's going to happen is if you get a red one day, you might lose a day of rehab the next day. So that's what I tell patients, right? So it's not, you're not going to hurt yourself. You're just going to lose your next day of rehab. So don't push yourself to these big reds, right? If you realize you're red, then you're too far. Your baseline is off a little bit there. Never do more than what you did the night before, okay? Even if, or what you did the day before was your daily challenge. Even if it was awesome, okay, and you decided to do 10-minute walk, you don't get out there and do 10 minutes at green and say, oh, I'm going to go to 12 minutes. No, you 10 minutes, you're done. That's your daily challenge. You get your victory. You go home. The next day, you increase. Right? Never do less than what you decided. So again, don't go 10 minutes and be like, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to do 5 minutes today. No, you push yourself till you're getting red. Okay? Always progress in intensity and duration. And I say, just like any other challenge, there's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. That's okay. You have A days, B days. We all have it. Right? Focus on what we've achieved, not what lies ahead. So that's where the planner becomes really important, and the calendar. So I often tell patients, just go and look back at all the stuff you did. I had a great patient yesterday who came in, and this always happens. You come in and the patient's like, I'm like, how are you doing? She's like, the same. You're not doing any better. I'm like, okay, so it's been 2 months, right? And I can already see from her that...
I think I saw the same one.
I think we've all seen the same
They're all the same one, right?
Yeah.
Saying you're not any better. And I look at her, I can tell just by looking at her she's better.
Yeah.
Like, I know she's better, right? So now my job is okay, what am I going to get her to say? And then as soon as she says it, I'm going to jump on it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it for her, but I'm going to pay very close attention to this patient. And the moment she says, identify something that's better, I'm going to redirect her entire thinking. Mm-hmm. I'm going to positively reinforce that with her and give her my approval. That's where she get my approval. Then no one's getting my approval otherwise. I'm not approving negativity. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm not empathizing with patients. Right? There's a great empathy talk that was given at one point. There's a guy, he's a head of CBT at U of T. There's awesome empathy talk. Empathy's bad. So she comes in, she sees that.
My entire life is empathy. Empathy is bad.
Empathy is bad.
I
Hope is a
see that talk.
Hope is a tyrant, and empathy is bad. Okay, so she's sitting there, and I'm trying to remember what she said. She's like, "Oh, I'm not better." So we start talking, right? Oh, and then she says, and then I'm like, okay, so what are the things you're doing? Blah 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 blah, right? And then she says, but by the way, I'm eating breakfast. And I was like, you're eating breakfast? And she's like, laughs. She starts smiling, right? I'm like, she's like, yeah. Every time I started eating breakfast, and when I eat breakfast, I laugh because I remember you told me if anything I can do, if I don't do anything, I should at least start eating breakfast. And now she's eating breakfast every day. Okay, this person was not eating breakfast. Like, she'd get up and do nothing and not make breakfast for herself. Like, I don't know if it was intermittent fasting or whatever, but assuming you're eating 3 meals a day, okay. So am I. But if you're not doing something weird like that, right, you should be eating breakfast, right? And if anything, just eating breakfast, the act of making breakfast is doing something. It's taking the responsibility to make a meal. So she's laughing. I jumped all over that. And I was like, what do you mean? You're making breakfast? She's like, yeah, every day now. I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, you're doing that? That's great.
And that's getting that thing into routine too. And that's with a lot of the patients I see. I mean, their lives are just chaotic.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we
little...
talk about, okay, you have to have a routine and the routine. Mm-hmm. But sometimes the question is when I say, have you had breakfast? And then when they say they can't afford it, that's another. Yeah, right. That's where that's another whole issue.
Yeah. Yes and no.
Yeah.
I don't think so. Why is that an issue?
Because they don't have, a lot of the patients I see, I shouldn't say a lot, but some, they have to either pay rent or food. And the food's always on the...
What else is anybody on?
Sometimes cigarettes, sometimes alcohol.
Good.
And then I do another referral to another practitioner.
What else is spending money on?
Quite often when I look at their budgets, very little. Because I work with a lot of people who are on ODSP, and they get $1,100 a month. So by the time they pay their rent, maybe phone.
What kind of phone do they have? It's funny that people on ODSP all have iPhones. Isn't that funny? I know, I'm not being mean. So I'm not being mean, right? And I'm just saying, what is the bigger goal? There's that empathy, right? Into a routine. routine.
A routine.
That
absolutely.
little
Yeah.
bit of like routine will give them a little bit of responsibility, and who knows what kind of seed that will plant. What other options do you have? Right.
Yeah.
So this is where and again I'm not I do empathize, but if I continue to empathize and not advocate for them to advocate for themselves, take responsibility for themselves, they will stagnate and stay exactly where they are,
Move forward.
even if they're making $1,100 a month.
Yeah.
Like, what other option do you have? You don't have another option.
We're just enabling them.
It's enabling, right? And it's hard, but that's like, I believe that's our job.
Mm-hmm. It is. It's a hard thing to not get sucked into
Yeah.
these really
Very
traumatic stories
Yeah.
of what their daily
Yeah.
life is
Yeah.
like. But our role is to cheerlead them sort of out of that and encourage them that it's possible, right?
And look at some other ways of getting the food.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's the food bank, going to the community dinners, there are other options.
So if that person takes 3 months to figure out a way to eat breakfast and then just starts doing it, even if it's minimal, it's that you're gonna. That's wow, you did that.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Good for you. What else could you do in your life if you took all of that focus and started to apply that to other little tiny things, one step at a time?
Right.
Because they've been on ODSP for 10, 15 years, and they've been in this life for 10, 15 years. They're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, and they're going nowhere. Right?
Even just getting them in the routine of getting up at the same time every day.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So that's the other thing I hammer on too
Yeah,
is sleep.
yeah.
Sleep routine, sleep hygiene, right? Sleep hygiene because it does make things better. You go to sleep at the same time of night and wake up every day in the morning, and that's just scheduled. You get your responsibility. It's hard to do that, right? So, okay. So I was saying, focus on what you achieve, right? So so this patient, I went back and like, okay, don't look like you have. Yeah, you got tons of stuff. You might have, but look, you're eating breakfast now. What else have you? So I told her to go home and read her calendar. Go look back in January. What you were not doing, or what you were doing at the time. What were your goals then? Like you would have had back there, eat breakfast. Do you write eat breakfast now on your calendar anymore? No. Did you have it in your calendar for? Yeah. And she laughs, right? So the last thing I'll end with is that. I like that reaction because sometimes I'll talk to patients about this. It's like, why, for something before she couldn't do was eating breakfast, right? Then she smiled. She's like laughing about it now, right? Whereas before when I told her to eat breakfast, it was like the most daunting thing ever. She's like, I don't know if I could do that, right? Because it was such an anxiety for her. To think of the idea of tomorrow waking up and making breakfast and forcing it down her throat, that she hasn't done for so long, right? That was like real intense anxiety. So it's a very cool thing. When you see people laughing at themselves or things, or even if you notice laughing at stuff that you used to do or not do in the past, that's the transition from integrated anxiety. Integrated anxiety becomes humor, becomes funny. If you think about stuff that you laugh at, like some of the things that used to like cause you anxiety in the past, right? Now you kind of laugh at it a little bit, right? So that's the transition. So it's really cool. You pick that up in some patients, right? And you see that, they kind of smile at things. You know that was something that was significantly anxious for them in the past. Right? So that's what I kind of told them.
And you know that like actually the new neural pathway has formed then.
Yeah, because you integrated it.
Yeah.
Integrated. It's not coped.
Yeah.
Coping anxiety, they won't laugh at that.
Yeah.
Because it's still in anxiety, covered up.
Yeah.
Right?
And there's shame. Like
Yeah,
as soon as
exactly.
they're laughing, there's
Exactly.
the shame is
Yeah.
kind of.
Yeah. That's why comedy is funny. That's why stand-up comedy is funny. All they're doing is making fun of all of our anxieties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So anyway. Every day you're getting better, no matter how you feel, and then be good to yourself. Positive reinforcement, I think I've done a lot. There we go.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you.
Yeah. We're so lucky to have you in the framework.
Thanks, Lisa. That's very nice. I'm lucky to have you guys to talk to about this. And when I present this, more I communicate and talk about it, the better it is. Like the more you talk about this, the more effective you become.